Welcome to another episode of Stack Rack TV, Stack Rack Boxing, whatever you want to call it. You know, when we talk about boxing, talk a little shit from time to time, but mostly we just Mac Jack, Slack Jack, and Jack. You know, we talking about the other side of the coin today. You know, a lot of people think this is a clear-cut victory for Shakur Stevenson. You know, and in this topic today, you know, I'm going to tell y'all about some of the ways that I believe Teofimo can get this dub. You know, what he can do, you know, some strategies and tactics that he could use, you know, to neutralize a guy like Shakur Stevenson and possibly come up with the win. Before I get into any tactics and strategies, you know, I want y'all to first understand the type of fighter that Teofimo Lopez is, right? He's a guy that is very talented, you know, very skillful, got a lot of speed, you know, has a lot of IQ in there. You know, the same thing I said, you know, prior with Shakur Stevenson or Keyshawn Davis, you know, his sparring track record is high. You know, he's been in there with guys at a high level for a long time, you know, especially in the pro ranks. Josh Taylor, Vasily Lomachenko, let's go on and on, right? He has everything it takes to come out with the dub. You know, his speed, you know, his quickness, his footwork, you know, and that experience fighting at a high level, right? Teofimo Lopez is one of those guys who can fight up to the level of his competition and can fight down to the level of his competition, right? We both know that these guys coming into this ring have a lot of IQ. You know, we know that both of these guys are very talented, have a lot of skills. You know, they command respect in the ring, and they both control the ring how they want to control the ring when they're going against their own respected opponents, right? So, you know, you got a guy like Teofimo Lopez who, like I said before, has a lot of speed. That speed can be used to hurt a guy like Shakur Stevenson, because Shakur Stevenson, this will be his first time fighting a guy with this much speed, right? We seen the problem that Shakur Stevenson had against De Los Santos. He wasn't really trying to engage, you know, and I feel like in this fight, you know, especially because it's another Turkey event, right? So, you know, upsets are possible, but, you know, Teofimo Lopez has a great chance of winning, you know, depending on how these judges are looking at this fight, you know, how they'll be scoring this fight, right? So like me, when I'm watching a fight, right, I like to see a combination of things. You know, is this guy controlling the ring, right? How is this guy looking? Is he landing precise punches? You know, is his punches accurate? How is his defense? Is he catching? Is he catching and shooting? I like to watch all of that to determine whether a guy won a round, right? So, for example, Teofimo Lopez, right? He will have to be the aggressor in this fight, meaning he will have to be pushing the pace, right? I believe that when Teofimo Lopez fights pushing the pace, he does better, especially when he got an opponent that's looking to engage as well. We all know Shakur Stevenson, sometimes when he gets into that Philly shell, sometimes he could be stagnant, just focusing on catching. Sometimes so much so that he's catching and not shooting. I believe that this work in Teofimo Lopez's advantage because of the speed. Teofimo is coming into this fight with controlled aggression, effective aggression. I can see that working in his favor with these judges. You know, a lot of judges right now, especially with the current landscape of boxing and how boxing is being judged, I could see that being a problem for Shakur Stevenson, especially if Teofimo Lopez is the one being the more busier fighter, right? Teofimo Lopez is going to have to be the more busier fighter, right? Again, you know, him chasing Shakur around the ring, you know, that could be a problem of interest for Shakur Stevenson because, you know, like I said before, the landscape of boxing, especially as it pertains to judging, is changing. You know, they don't want to just see a guy box, twist and turn the guy, you know, and get a decision win. You know, a lot of guys are voting, you know, contrary to that style. You know, they want to see the guy that's being more aggressive, looking to push the pace, you know, searching for the fight, trying to make the fight. And I can see that working in Teofimo Lopez's favor. The thing is, what are the judges looking for on fight night? You know, what are they wanting to see? You know, we all know that this is a turkey card, right? And on turkey cards, you know, he's already been adamant that, hey, I don't want any Tom and Jerry fights. Shakur Stevenson fits the Tom and Jerry mold. Teofimo Lopez isn't that type of fighter. Teofimo Lopez is a fighter that comes in on fight night looking to fight. He's not looking to twist and turn the guy, run around the ring all. He's not that type of fighter, right? So one of my main points on how Teofimo Lopez can get this W is, how effective is his aggression? Is he cutting off the ring? Is he searching for the fight? Is he trying to engage, but Shakur Stevenson keeps taking 2 steps back and not coming back with nothing in return? All of these things play a factor in the judging of a boxing match, especially in 2026, right? Boxing no longer has those same judges that prioritize, a boxer as opposed to the aggressor. Right now, Teofimo Lopez being an aggressor, right? He can also box. We're not accustomed to seeing Shakur Stevenson be the aggressor and box against a caliber of a fighter like a Teofimo Lopez. We would have seen that in the De Los Santos fight. William Cepeda, again, wasn't as fast. He didn't have the IQ that Teofimo Lopez had in the ring. And, he was RoboCop. Come forward, don't work. Come forward. That's not going to be Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez has a lot more skills than a guy like Cepeda. He's able to use his jab. He's able to use combinations. He's able to use his footwork. And he's gained all of those attributes over the years fighting the level of competition that he's been fighting. I believe that he could step up to the test in this fight because of the magnitude of the fight. You beat Shakur Stevenson, that speaks for itself, right? Then on top of that, if you beat him in an impressive fashion, like I said before, it's getting harder for guys to get unanimous decisions, especially when they just twisting and turning the guy. We seen that with that O'Shaquie Foster fight when he fought Conceição. My personal opinion, he boxed incredible in that fight, but the judge voted in favor of the guy who was more of the aggressor. So that's my point as it pertains to Teofimo Lopez. If he's searching for the fight, if he's looking to be active, and Shakur Stevenson is prioritizing defense, I could see Teofimo Lopez stealing this fight from right underneath Shakur Stevenson, with the excuse being that Shakur Stevenson wasn't as busy as he should have been. He didn't take the chances that he should have taken, right? And like I said before, judging right now in boxing has changed. So I could see Teofimo Lopez winning a decision, based off of his output and Shakur Stevenson's lack of output.